Hey, welcome back, everyone. You can see what we're going to be dealing with today is something in the direction of keying, but it's not quite what people most normally mean by keying. You might even call it mostly in the direction of strategies about anchoring, but it just has this other sort of slightly different feel to it. And I've found over and over again, it's just useful to talk about things, in that narrower sense sometimes, and not just try to lay this out in such a big way that it means too many things. These things often mean more than they seem, as we talked about, I think, last week. Uh, so, but let me tell you what I'm doing before I go too far into this. I have someone with me as an audience. You know him, it's Sean. It was his. It was his critique I was doing. I might put that out there in the form of a question. We'll see if that happens. But it's a critique I was giving him on some work, some still life he was working on. And this issue came up based on something I'd been thinking just driving into the studio, coming out of a movie situation of all things, watching a movie. So, but before we start, so this is going to be about keys in a painting, okay? Before we start, I want to just make sure I thank John J. and Nancy D. I think that, one of those is recurring, and thank you both. Thank you both very much. Just the sort of thing we're going to be needing on a regular basis. By the way, while I'm talking to you, just for 2 more seconds, I need to tell you that we're planning to be in London on the 19th of May through June 14th, and for an intensive workshop, 4-week workshop, and pastel painters, preferably people who have some confidence in their drawing. For this one, I may schedule one for you guys who don't have much enough background or some level of that, but there is a pre-registration that's already going on online. We've got a couple people already signed up, and it's limited. So Mr. Producer is going to put up information for us, but I'm just getting you started. He wants me to announce it each week. So there it is, and let's get on with the video. Okay. All right. All right. So since I don't have a question per se, at least at this moment, let's go straight into. I'm going to show you this first screen, not that screen, this screen. You can, I don't know if you have a way to do that, but you could put it aside. These are the points I'm going to be talking about. I just simply wanted to make sure that I end this thing with a great deal of clarity for everybody. It's easier for me to pronounce these riddles, these aphorisms, and not provide enough clarity, but I'm trying to get to the point of providing useful understanding. That I say, make it clear enough what I'm talking about that you might try it, put it to use, okay? And so, as I said, today is talking about keys in a painting. So, now, as I said, now I have Sean right here. You want to say hi, Sean?
Hello, everyone.
He's here and he's behind me because I want him to be able to look at the screen with me. And when points come up, he may even reach over and point the arrow for me, which, by the way, Sean is just that.
Yeah.
But let me make a couple points to you. I'm going to be talking about Boston School paintings mostly, and then my paintings. But we're talking about anything like this. These are Boston School starts. I'm going to show you at the beginning. So there's one by DeCamp. There's one by me, just a demonstration. There's one by Tarbo. And then there's a Paxton that's the new necklace. And that's where it's going to go. And we're talking about this stuff that has everything to do with what you're doing, particularly at the beginning of a painting. So let me give you a little bit of a run through on some of the points here first. You know that everything we're doing is different from other people's way of working. We're not doing any version of drawing around objects when we're doing this kind of painting. We're setting down color notes, much more like a Monet type impressionist might do eventually. Eventually, we know that Monet might have made marks in earlier ones, but there's more evidence that he was out there just setting down notes in later ones. And you see that in American painters like Metcalf and others in the Boston School, and not just the Boston School. So but that is color first, and the attempt to get color relationships, which is color value. So it's both values and colors, but it's doing it, allowing drawing to come by in a gradual way. And so in the second point here, you see that what we're doing, you'll see Gamel's comment to us was we work area by area. And I don't know whether my sense of it when he was working with us is in a paint a still life in his studio with the what I'm going to call the academic way. It looked like the area was more or less the object. The way we did things, it was like, oh, that's the area that contains the flower. That's that area. And it makes sense. You would think about the relationships of things in that area, but the Boston School way of working is the areas aren't object areas, right? So that next line there, it says it's not the hat or the shoe area, it's the edge. So it's the effect. It's what happens where two things meet. And then you have that whole discussion about the from Leonardo about the projectiveness, and then that idea of blurring your eye to see who's on first. And then thirdly, the idea of coming out of a fog, which is if you're drawing those first powerful guys, you'll have that sense of coming out of a fog. So I think what I'm going to do is leave this off. You have it here. Well, maybe I won't for a second. Do you have any thoughts yet, Sean, based on anything you've heard me say so far? I don't want to make it a long
No,
video, so, but
no. I think
okay.
so far I'm with you.
Feel free to speak right up. So my next line there, I'm saying there's such a thing as painting too much and too many. Most people go to an area and they paint stuff that isn't timely. What you need is stuff over here to talk to stuff over here to talk to stuff over there. So your job is really to blur down your eyes and sort out who these dominant players are that need to get into a conversation, because they and what they're doing to the whole sets up the entire construct, shall we say?
So
Yeah.
painting. I have this problem all the time with painting too much. Is it? I have to stay to the visual order in order to determine the top readers. And sometimes I'm painting and I'm painting an edge or something, and then I just notice this other thing that's jumping out at me, but I got both eyes open. Is that like a clear example?
That's it. That's what we're going to be talking about.
Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly right. We're going
Okay.
to come right into that. But hold that in mind there in case
Okay.
in case just the way it comes up might be helpful too. But when I say you draw painting too much and too many, it means too many things, too many events. And so we're trying to get you to decide what event is most important in a given area. So we could jump down to that line that says significance. There are things that are very important at the start, the most significant things, even in a painting. That's why you blur down. You see who's got the first grab at the human eye coming, the viewer's eye coming around the corner. So those guys are going to wind up having this significance that way, high significance, because it's almost like the first line of a sonnet or the first paragraph of a book or something like that. There's something about it, right? Well, there are places like that, and I was actually buying into this because I was listening. I was watching a movie a week or more ago, and just all of a sudden was noticing with what clarity this particular director had made his points in each scene, and it's just and we begin to see what we're talking about. There's something that has to be achieved in every scene of the painting, right? And so for us to get our handle on just getting clarity about what it is in any portion, every part of this picture, to try to get onto that. What is that? What's the key thing? So I'm talking about the word keys, right? What's the key thing in that area? And we're talking about events now. We're talking about dark meets light mostly, right? But more than that, of course, but it's just a small area. And again, I didn't bring up his quotes here, but just refer back to the Benson advice to his daughter. And if you don't have that, anybody doesn't have that, just please email me and ask for it, okay? I'm at Ingbretson_studio at yahoo.com. So in the course of doing this, though, because we are we're going to a passage of the painting and we're going to say, and what about that area must I do? You already know because you blurred your eye that there is that area. Now you're going there and saying, now exactly what must I do? Who's in charge down here? And what should I do and what shouldn't I do? Because every minute you put in down there with something you shouldn't do, it's only shouldn't because you need to be all over the place at once in the start. You see what I mean? But you need to be wholly effective. So I use this phrase here now, the finish is in the start. Of that point, not of that object or that area writ large, as Sean was just saying, it's not about that third and fourth and fifth thing that might happen to be in there, but it's about that one thing that is contributing and crucial to the establishment of the grand abstraction, the grand plan. Okay? So for now, but I'm going to be looking at pictures and all these things should come back up again. I wish you were all here to just throw up your hand when we get toward the end and they don't come up again. Sean won't do it for you. I'm asking Sean to just do it for himself, for his own understanding. So if it comes up, it's because he doesn't have clarity, but often that means you don't. You won't either. All right. So effectively, what I'm saying is we're coming out of a fog. That's the darkened eye. You darken down your eyes, now it doesn't mean you're always only doing that, right? Because you need to establish top and bottom and things like that. But when you establish top or bottom, I'll show you again when we get there, that you have to do them according to the look of nature. So this is kind of like if you go down to the Ray bottle, it's rather a sketch model. You decide who's kind of significant, and you deal with those guys, but not with everybody, because it's a sketch model. It's a preliminary, but we do it in a very articulate way, albeit preliminary, right? You'll see what I mean. But maybe I'm getting too far into this, but I want to say it all once and then try to make sure I say it all again with pictures. Okay? So so you are coming out of a fog means there is an order to what you're doing. You're trying to work with the strongest guys, but even if you wind up having to work with some weak guys just to set up some spatial data, do that well, but don't do it out of it. Don't make it stick out more than it should. So by the time you get two or three things in there, you've got to make sure the order is still being kept. Okay, but you need to express every area as well as you can. That part of that area that you actually need to set up that unity of what's coming out of the fog. Okay, so you need to know what you're in the area for, right? Well, you look down the area and you say, well, who do I have to get, and what three other guys that look pretty convincing or demanding or seductive? I might not. Am I going to just leave it alone, right? Well, you're going to have to sort that out while you're watching the whole, or while you're looking at I'd say with soft eyes at those other areas. You'll see who just keeps coming at your eyes, no matter how soft they are. And that's probably the guy, okay? Undoubtedly the guy, right? So you're in the area, but you got to deliver on that, okay? So, and so we're talking about now what is the keys of the area, any particular area. There are things that you're going to find you must get, and that's what we're going to be talking about. I have in past times talked about them as platoon leaders, just that you know that if there's a visual order, a bunch of data down here, this one guy is stronger than all the rest. That's the guy you're going to get set up because he's talking to it's like generals are talking to the other generals or whatever, but every area has its leadership character. The one guy that you do him, take care of him, and he'll probably, the rest of the area will be considerably more manageable, shall we say? Get him into a level of understanding of what his role is and what the role of that area is to the big game. All right. So then again, smarter, not harder. So if you know what it is, your job is to just make sure you go down there and say, oh, I don't have to draw that whole area. I don't have to paint that whole area. This is what people ask me. How in the heck do you cover a canvas in 2 hours? A large canvas in 3 to 6 hours. How do you do that and be done and actually be accurate enough to walk away and let it dry? It's the smarter, not harder. It's actually what you choose. You choose limited numbers of things. But there's a bigger thing to it. And by the way, when you do it, you debrief to the whole. That's just keep observing whether it's coming out of the fog in unity. You have to know what minimally you must achieve, but that's also in the been referred to before. Know what you're after in the area. And so you're maximizing on the minimum you can put into these areas. You're not trying to draw lots of stuff. You're trying to get as much as you need so that you can see it when you're looking over here. You'll actually be able to see its role, see what it's doing with this and with this guy way over here. All these diverse guys. By the way, I use that point in stars. When you're a kid, you made star by just going from 5 points. You went out like that. You went round and round and round. You're jumping from point to point like that. Think that way about being around your canvas. But at each of these points, you want to deliver something of value, right? Now, it's going to be preliminary. It's going to be the first shot at it. So it's not going to be as great as it will be by the end. But it has to be effective. And so you have to maximize on that little thing that you're deciding is the thing that's going to be useful. And if it doesn't look useful to you, work on it some more. Maybe make it cover more territory. Make it whatever it is. Or maybe the effect isn't strong enough and doesn't actually. So you're always watching this to this and this to this. All right. But make sure whatever you do that you actually, when you look back at your painting, you actually are showing it, right? And that's the debrief model. I'm only mentioning points and angles and joints and rollers because they come up. The one from Sargent when you're talking about points and angles, you're talking about events like this at key places that you're actually using in a geometric way. A big sloppy curve doesn't get you much you can measure. You can get halves, quarters, or anything with, but a point coming down and hitting another point and getting cut off by it, creating a another line coming down and hitting another line, creating a point. That's something you can do geometry. You can get an exact angle between that and something else, between the top of the painting and the bottom of the painting and that point, or the side of the painting and that point. You follow me? So that's the points and angles game. But the better you articulate in these places, right, that you've already decided are keys to this painting. Well, but work on it. See if you can follow why. This is our way of working that's wildly different from the idea of going around and drawing an object, no matter who or how you do it. If the preliminary drawing is there, we're talking about something where this would even be useful. And then the joints and rollers one simply comes out of this idea of Jerome's not Jerome's, but David. He talks about joints and rollers. He does it he means anatomy. He means the bony joint of the elbow and the fat muscle. He's talking anatomy. But I find it to be useful for us because the joints are these points that we're making, these keys of any given area. They're an isolated little unit that has power, and I call it a joint because the rest of it, you're going to gradually be trying to just flow together and finally isolate these points, but with the general impression. So there's always going to be the sort of the gradual filling in the course of this afternoon of lay-in, so that the canvas gets fully covered. And yet the drawing at the joints is going to be very articulate and very precise. And you're going to move it and correct it and adjust it and all that sort of stuff till it is. This is all done by trial and error, so just keep that in mind, okay? It's all done by putting down a very effective thing and getting two more out there and then just seeing how you have to adjust them until they're in the right place on the frame, until they're the right gesture and proportions, as ovoid, shall we say, of, just, you call it a constellation, these first few, you think of it. But I like that idea that it's a sort of a funny little shape, and ovoid is a good use for it. Good word for that. All right. Sean, were there any questions that are really obvious there, something I might even want me to address?
Well, I know one thing that I think about all the time is my lack of.
You might need to speak louder. I'm finding your mic is a little low.
Oh, okay. Like seeing or using coming out of the fog in an effective way.
Yeah.
Like I understand it in theory, but when I'm painting, should I be seeing the painting in a way that tells me this is coming out of the fog? Or is it just
Well, how do you mean that exactly? Because, we didn't create a fog. They're just 3 points.
Well,
so the fog is a theoretical world, right?
Yeah.
There's 3 points, and they are the only 3 points. But we have the imagination to say, if there were a fog there, these would be the first 3 things I would see.
Okay.
So
that clears it up. But sometimes I think, because there's this whole aspect of feathering away from a joint.
Right.
And there's also the white of the canvas.
This is the feathering away he's talking about right here, the feathering away. Anyway, but yeah.
And the white of the canvas, we're supposed to kind of see the paint separate. Like,
yeah, you're expecting too much. I'm going to tell you, most of the stuff that happens in impressionist painting, literally painting from life, most of what happens is due to the brilliance of your imagination. The things I'm talking about require imagination. It's the strangest thing to say, isn't it? Given that we're just copying that thing over there. Think about it anyway for a little bit. But these things are, so you could call them figuratively speaking. You could say that about it. It's rather figuratively speaking.
Okay.
Leave it that way for now.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to suggest to you is if you articulate, so the keys in this painting, and I'll talk about that, but the keys in this painting, it's obvious, isn't it, if you blur down your eyes. There's something about this, there's something about this, probably something over here. And that's more or less it, maybe something about this. But I'm trying to suggest to you that if you will articulate those elements of this thing reasonably well, you're going to see the whole girl. She'll just be there. Now, you won't see the girl there because you might not have masked this whole thing into a color, and you wouldn't have turned her cheek or any of those things, possibly. You would have put down a color. You would have put down a color note here, maybe moving it from golden to red or whatever. You would have had this color here and this color out here, this color out here, and that version of the dark over there. All those notes might just be sitting there, right? And then in the conversation that you see around Sargent, then you'd be bringing your drawing by bringing those together. So, but in this case, we're setting up this point to this point, And we are trying to find its place in the sun. So this winds up being something rather in the direction of a triangle. Maybe he's even bringing that in because he needs more base, more of a low point down here.
Mm.
But in any case, we're talking about just seeing that if you went to an area like this, what's key to this area, right? And you can say, well, is it key to get that unit right there? Might be because, that creates the point, right? But there are other reasons for keys, like it might be the importance of the power of this spot, the light effect. So let me not go
Yeah.
too far in that direction. I'm just trying to suggest to you that when you're in any area, no matter where you are, you want to know who's in charge of that area, who's useful. And this point up here is for placement purposes now. To this point down here, to this point down here, anybody should be able to get that relationship right. Now, this won't work out for you if you don't know how to see 2D. You have to be able to reduce the world in front of you to the second dimension. Again, the use of imagination is so crucial to just paint the truth in front of you. Isn't that interesting? You have to be able to see it as if it was 2D, because otherwise you'll start going in and thinking you know things that can't be expressed on canvas. So you reduce it to 2D, and you know this distance from here to here is just a left-right distance.
Mm.
And this is just a distance, and these distances are similar to each other, but just on planes that work like this. So hopefully we have that kind of an understanding. So let me go to the next one, just see what else comes up here. Anything that you've heard all the conversation, all of you have heard all the conversation, so you might have in mind your own kinds of questions, but you can see how if I'm talking about setting up the whole abstraction, you can see there's a bunch of stuff I haven't done here. But you can see in the power area, I've done the very powerful things and expressed them well. I keyed on this, you would say. I keyed on it. I decided that's a key to the area. This up here is a key to this area. This over here, these are keys in the power structure of this thing, in the first setting up moments of these things. These are big deals. Now, it doesn't mean that when we first put these down, by the way, you're doing color. Well, the keys in color are always what's the most chromatic note. So that'd be sitting there maybe, and maybe this one or these guys would be all sitting there trying to see who's in charge around here as far as chroma goes. What's the darkest dark? Is that the darkest dark? And what's the lightest light? Appears to be this one. And so these things are all in the conversation. Those are, that's kind of keying a painting. But I'm still mostly trying to say that when you go to an area and want to paint something in an area, ask yourself what it is you must achieve, right? So, for example, when you're here, on this bottom edge here, you have to have achieved the contrast that produced this light effect at that edge to be right to this one, and to be right to this one, for example. So we're keying on this edge, not the one above it. It's much weaker and relatively unimportant.
Hmm.
Is that providing a little clarity about what I'm meaning?
Yeah.
All right, let's just so now, not just see if more come to mind. Now, this is a really nice example. This is Tarbell. By the way, I don't know the size of this. I'm going to go back because one of you asked me, and I said I'd start doing it. And this one is 18 by 24. I don't know the size of that one. I'd guess it'd be somewhere in that same range, like 20 inches. But if you can count this as a life-size head, and I don't know that it was, it's a preliminary study by the look of it, so I don't know whether it is. But I'm just letting you know and also letting you know the name. So this is Tarbell. Don't know what size it is. It looks like an actual lay-in of a painting. My guess is it's probably at least 40 inches high, but that's just me guessing, It could just be a study. So if you go to an area, let's just say you're over in this area, you have to be able to determine what is key in that area. What is the thing in that area? Or a key even, you might say. Now, if you're just talking about color, it's the greenness, and probably at that spot that is the thing that you're going to say, I think I better find out what that's all about and whether I can do it. But when it comes to effects, and this is largely what I'm talking about now, when it comes to effects, this is the key to the entire area right there. You can see that if you darken your eyes. Now, we might not do that immediately because there are stronger and more important guys. Like down here, this is way more dominating than this. This is stronger than that over there. This winds up being, it winds up being very important that you look at that and nail it. That is to say, you have to look at this area and say, it's not this and all this and all this. It's all very nice, but this is the key to this area. This is an exit, and that light effect is at its most brilliant right there. And you can see that he really tried to nail it right there. He keyed on it. He said this is a key thing. So, and so you can see he did the same thing here, and he didn't do it there, right? He picked on this spot. Look at that again, finding a point, a useful point. But the same thing with all sorts of stuff around different areas. What's the key? Where this lands. But the other part of what I'm trying to say about these things, you need to say, I'm not going to be talking about this junk here and this junk here. That's generalized. But I got to do something good about that. I got to place that well. That's that's what these areas are. They're rather keys. They're keys. And there are keys like everywhere. This corner right here is key.
Hmm.
That location is key. So
There's
go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
this. I don't know if this where this lands in this conversation, but what's coming to my mind is about the difference between simplifying through unity, simplifying to unity, and generalizing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of picking up that, you know, knowing the key of an area may help me understand how to simplify the rest. But
Yes.
but
Have you found that to be true, or are you just guessing that it might be
I'm
true
guessing
based on this? Yeah.
because like let's say in an area up here, there might be a bunch of junk here,
Right.
or even in here,
Sure.
things that he could see that he's handling a certain way. But when I look at pictures, I don't see it myself, you know, because I'm only
Yes.
seeing what they.
We don't see the original.
And so I'm always faced with that problem, and it throws me off every time. I don't quite know how to handle that, you know, because
Well, the way you said it, I'm not sure I do either. In other words, there's nothing we do that has an area like this is essentially flat by nature. An area like, oops, an area like this looks like the couch must have texture on it. It's not essentially flat by nature. It's formy, going from light to dark, and having chunky stuff in it. But it is a generalization. It's just saying, but I'm going to do that about this stuff. I'm even going to, but what I need to make sure I know is exactly where that's landing, you know, or at some point there's going to be an effect that has to be that I can say, let's make that one right. I'm not going to make all these secondary ones right, but let's make this one right. That by point and this by effect, shall we say. And so what I'm saying is, though, that what we find is to close out the painting in 2 hours, we will generalize just like that. And the background suggests the same thing. Maybe there was junk on that table back there, and maybe some few shadows, odd types, maybe it was wallpaper. I don't know. But what you won't see typically in a Boston School painting is them generalizing to flatness, to just create a false unity. So that's not what you meant, but I want to make sure I say
I'm
that.
glad you said that.
Shadows are flat as a hat is actually basically true. If you just look casually at something, you won't see things happening in here. But to the degree that you do, it's because normally it's because there's light there. So if your eyes are blurred down even a little bit, areas like this will stay busy and areas like this won't. So there's an element of what you might call relative flatness that's the right way to handle areas like that. But any other spot, like this is simple, but it's suggesting larger forms and movements of color and all sorts of other things. But what about this area is key? What about this area do we want to say? And that I have to make sure I get something there. He seems to have thought there's something key about this spot here. And by the way, think about these paintings sometimes in terms of what they don't show you. These starts, you know, what isn't there that probably was there, because when you can figure out what he didn't paint yet, you're in a good place. But you have to do some imagination again to try to see what that could have been like, you know, because your inclination is to wander into areas. Like here's an area here, this changes colors, goes into this one. But how much time does he put into that? Just an adequate amount of time. He gets out of that pretty fast, doesn't he? He doesn't miss the lostness point. He actually makes that's a point. You might say a key. By the way, lostness is key. So relative lostness even is key. So when things are relatively the same value, all we mean by lostness is the same value, not the same color. And so if you had this going on, or you had the background going on, you could run these together, and at some point you'd say, oh, you know, but right about here, they're truly not the same. But that's not a drawing issue there. It's just what the main point is, and this is where Benson says, now draw these lostnesses really hard, like really work on them. Oh yeah, it doesn't mean to go into them looking in. It means make a point of getting the full lostness in those areas. But there are different ways you'll find you'll have to handle that. And you can see that there's stuff going on here that doesn't quite jive with all that's not resolved, these kinds of joints here.
Yeah.
That kind of, as long as it doesn't bothering your eye and creating a very false general impression, you can leave those things alone. We like the start to look like it's being worked on. It's good for the psyche is good for the mentality that you want to be in, which is being worked on mentality.
Mm.
It's a workmanlike approach. So you don't go down here and try to figure out who this was down here, or what the painting is about, what the subject was of that little print down there. Do you? Yeah. No, you don't. You don't want to. But on the other hand, in this area, you'll see that it's not insignificant to nail that, to figure out where that is, and exactly what it's doing when it meets this and this. This is way inconsequential comparatively. Now you're looking at a start, by the way. You don't know exactly when things were done.
Yeah.
That's where it'd be nice if you could turn this back a half hour and an hour and an hour and a half.
Yeah, like there was a point in time where this wasn't even.
Well,
You know,
yeah,
that's where
it
we
might have
go.
looked just like this. And he's
Yeah,
gotten
yeah.
far enough along to actually do just a little bit more, because he finds that the blob itself actually had a significant presence once he created blobs like that or some other ones up here. He realized that was also a player. Well, once you open up the next level of contrasts in a picture, it's opened up. You now have no choice but sort of to speak, to do it everywhere. It's one of the reasons to avoid that articulation. But the fact is, once you make it busy, well, busy is now a thing. Busy, busy, busy. But I'm still never going to recommend that what you do, instead of make it busy, is make it simplistic, because it's false. And it's not. That's a different way of painting. Okay, people do that. It's a different way of painting. Even this stuff here, you can say this is generic. He is saying that the brightest one is right here. There's no question about that. This looks like a shade on a window or something. The brightest one is here. He's even giving us some sense, clear sense, that this yellow is a factor in this whole yellow dance stuff here. And at some point, he makes a very significant point out of getting it what you might call right. But okay, I'm not sure if there are other thoughts for you there. But keep in mind that one thing I'm trying to say is there are keys in painting, and if you've chosen a spot down here like this, and you know there's nothing else in this area, then that's what we call the key. Now do good work to it and make it a useful. Make sure the key works or contributes. You know. But in the same area, the same way over here, this thing here, this area is more than important than this stuff. Right here, this is what you might call a key thing. Now it's going to set up a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, it's going to help you with the placement of this whole couch from here to here. It's going to be a big deal. So power that up so it actually, so use it as the key it is by making it as like as you can, without getting lost in it and doing it for 2 hours. Remember, you have to learn to be succinct, and this is again back to that idea that this is a sketch model we build out of an essential thing that's effectively doing what's there, but not a noodled or studied one. It's not that kind. But you have to have good concepts of it, and you have to look at them after you put them down and make sure that they resonate with nature and with their other players that you might say are participating at that point in the development of the painting. Any other thoughts on that one? Shall I go to the next one?
Yeah, you can go to the next one.
Now, I wonder if I should, well, let me just go to this one. And I know that Mr. Producer is going to have given us a way better image. Sorry, Mr. Producer, I can't believe I did this to you. And I don't have time to go back now. So, but if you'll just take the time to blur down your eyes a little bit, darken your eyes, you'll easily probably see that given all this stuff happening, there's something about this that's very consequential. Mm-hmm. Executing it consequentially, shall we say, is a big deal. Now, don't be out here drawing this object. Don't be out here making this thing. Don't make the painting up here. Don't make the paintings back there. Something about that's consequential. Something about this spot right here is consequential, right? So this, I'm saying significant. What? For what for? For the grand abstraction. This is the way we set up our grand abstraction. So you're coming out of the fog the whole time. These are the guys that are saying, do me. I'm a setup player. This blob over here is significant. This shoe group, particularly with the relation to this point here, but maybe even down there, significant. This stuff not. This stuff not. And you wouldn't be in a lay-in. It'd be much more like what we just looked at in the certain parts of the dress of the woman by Tarbell. But once you're there and you recognize that these might be key, you go to the area now over here, you might decide this is key, but you might have decided this point right here was more useful. And by the way, in that sense of who's powerful, I'm going to give you that as a sort of a lecture, sort of, you want to call it that. When you're in an area, there's something key about the strongest guy. That's the platoon leader. So even though you put a blob down here, you would say that's the leader, right? and you'd say this is the leader. You'd say this here, especially the cut of the bottom of the shoe, is the leader, right? There's
Yeah.
certain parts of these things. Those are the things we're getting going. That's why I said you're not painting objects, you're painting edges. So there are times when you don't do the most strong one. You might do the one that does some other, delivers something else. Eventually, you'll need that to be in charge of this area. That guy is what has to be right to the whole. That light has got to be right to this, but it's got to be right out here. It's going to be the director. It's going to be the guy that has to have such and such a strength. You can't add that in later. It has to have been calculated when you did this, so we say.
Yeah.
But so same thing here. You can see how you're going to key on this and not the rest of this, right? You're going to key on it. So these are keys. But you can see where they are. There are certain things, if you're looking at the whole painting, that might be one right there, right? Where the rest of the hand isn't anything like a key, right? That's wonderful lostness. Isn't that a delightful lostness there? That's,
Yeah.
by the way, that's because you're blurring your eyes, but in the fine version of this, that's very articulated. I've done a copy of this at full size. And by the way, the size of this thing in the original is about, I'm going to say it's also about 40 inches. I think it's way into the 30s, if not 40. Just so you have some idea. Now, did you have any thoughts about
No.
that? Is there anything come to mind?
No.
If you just darken your eyes a little bit, you'll know I'm going to say about it's an area here, it's an area here. You can see why I would say that. These are areas. But what I'm saying about them is they're also in the local area. They are the key to the area. This one is not the key to the area, even though it's powerful or whatever. This one is the key to the area. When you look over here, this is the guy that says, "You're talking to my family
Yeah.
over here." No, you're talking to me, buddy. Okay? Don't be talking to anybody else in the room. It's me. It's that sort of thing. This is what this guy has got to. This is setting up the area, etc. And so you'll see in many different areas, different ways. There's something about that you can plainly see sets up the entire. You got to know what that's up to. And over here the same. Okay. So now you can probably see if I go in close. Well, I did this funny. This is a painting that I did as a demonstration. We never resolved it because she burned herself and then then had to go on tour. She was in the National Guard. Let's see. So what I'm going to try to show you now is, though, that I took this whole painting now, and I'm saying now if you look at an area, you see who's key. This is key to this area. And this is the powerhouse. This is the speaker. This is the guy who's speaking over here, right? You can say the same thing about a blob like this. This whole this side here, the right side, disappears. I'm treating this, by the way, as if this was a painting. And in a second, I'm going to go back and just look at this locally. But you can see there's nothing about this stuff here that is anything like important. On the other hand, that's important. This light effect is important. And we're looking for things that are going to help us to really create clarity, to get confidence in our search for the truth of the general impression. So, yeah, I like this area very much, but you can see that the power of this area is going to be out in this zone, not on this side. I'm just trying to show you that. What you choose, it's going to be keep you from doing lots and lots of work. I say one edge too, by the way, and I want you all to think about not making this into that object. Make it just a one edge thing. Don't try to figure out what's happening in both, because I don't want it to become a size question. You don't have to deal with the size. If you just set up an edge and an effect, you can just deal with the location of this to some point, whatever the point is you find useful somewhere else. You set up something that's going to be useful in the larger conversation, and these are what I'm calling keys. Every area has a key to its association with the other data in the whole picture. So, you can see that there are things in the background here that have strength and contrast and all that sort of stuff that are right in keeping with what's happening in the middle of the painting, certain parts of this painting, certain parts of this, or stuff out here. So if you're doing an impression of this scene here with the painting sitting in the middle of it, you'd see that you wouldn't draw the painting, the figure. You'd be articulating the effect relationships between stuff in the picture and stuff outside the picture. This is the Impressionism 101. This is the naive eye. It doesn't see paintings from bolts. So let me just go to the painting itself just for a second. And I think this is going to clarify this better than anything else, or as well as anything else I've done so far. What I want to do is point out the shoes. I've isolated the shoes, but you can see this whole area here. This has a very pleasant three-dimensionality, doesn't it? There wasn't a thing I did to think about three-dimensionality doing that.
Hmm.
I just did my eyes down and did accurate relationships of edges and effects. And so in every area, you see that there's not everything about that foot that I had to work on, but I had to deliver certain things, including maybe that little bit of a thing there, but maybe for placement, whatever. But what has to be happening is that the relationships between the power readers, the strongest readers, and the rest, they have to be reasonable, and so you have to actually key on them. You have to say, what do I key on over in this area? Again, the only way to do this is darken your eyes, and you'll have a very clear sense of what keying even means.
When you're asking that question, what to key on, you're always comparing. I'm asking, you're always comparing the key to keys of other areas, or
No, 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 no.
okay,
So when you're looking at the whole, your goal is to get something in every area going, right?
yeah,
So this is all over the place at once, that model. So everybody knows that that's the all over the place at once model. So you're going to say down to here, that's a piece in the all over once model. That's no question that we need that. We need this. And what do we got down here? Not a whole lot, but we need something. We need the exit. Maybe we could use that.
hmm,
You see what I mean? But you can see there are different spots. That's a big deal right there.
yeah,
There's spots. A whole arm, this whole thing down the side is a big deal. This is all part of the all over the place at once model. Well, I don't have the. You can go look at the video, by the way, with all the other steps that I show in this thing and whatever I say about it. The point is, we're not keying on the foot.
yeah,
We're keying on visual data. And so when you look closer at this, right, or at this one, you can see that we drew here. Even over here, we didn't draw a hard edge, but we did something that is very evidently the toe of a slipper. You know what I mean?
hmm,
And some of this is on here, but it's not anything that we're saying. We're not, as it were, keying on it. We're not having to get it just right. These are things that you can get just wrong a little bit. I mean, obviously, if the slipper starts looking with totally the wrong size to the picture,
yeah,
once it becomes a slipper or once it becomes a size. But you can see this is the most obvious one of all. We have a shadow line here, but it just oozes, disappears, and literally just keeps on going. Bye bye, see you later. So, but you can see here, this is no way you're going to get out of this. So this is locally now. This is the guy in charge. Well, the next guy or related to it is this guy, right? And so you can see there are places in here. Well, if you pick one in the painting, you may choose later on that it should, maybe you will say it should have been the other one. Sometimes I'll pick one like this one because it's the best placeholder for space, for placement, and it's pretty similar to this one. So you have different reasons at times for doing it, but if you can just stay with this for some time, and again, you should look at my video and see what I actually do, because this is all a speculative thing. You go around doing research and finding out what's going to deliver. But one of the thing you're trying to do is maintain the power structure. Who's on powers, the highest contrast, sharpest edge guys, and make sure that stays the same. And yet, in every area, there's somebody to whom we can say, well, if I get nothing else in here, I got to get you.
there was a point that you brought up about effectiveness,
Yes.
and I could see how sometimes in an area like here,
Yep.
I'll be working on it, but not really have a good understanding of what is effective.
Right.
Would I be right in saying that when it's performing in a way that I can relate it to another key area, that it's effective? Or
No, I would do that. Well, I mean, the thing is, you should always check that. For
uh-huh,
example, this is a soft edge. You should always check it. You should certainly be aware of what other soft edges are doing.
uh-huh,
Not hard edges. Soft is a funny word, but hard's a funny word too if you think of it that way.
right,
But the sudden and abrupt, those edges. No, but what this is, that has something to say. Once it becomes this meets that, it's a soft edge. Yeah, you need to have some clarity. You glance around the room and look for three other guys that are like it.
mm,
You definitely do that, but that's not where you're putting your labor. You're putting your labor into this point here or some other stuff, and that's just there because you need a generic version of it because if you're going to be closing the canvas out, and this has got to be the right size, and so you're not into that. So I say it's like a sketch model in that way. So yeah,
for another, just for clarity, like let's say this effect right here is it's a pretty strong effect.
yes,
How do I, there's maybe looking at the picture now, I see how it relates to a lot of things and is effective.
mm-hmm.
But let's say, you only had a few floating effects going on, or even let's say this effect here in the beginning. What you know, I, how do I know if it's effective? Is because
Well,
quite
that's an exercise of time, experience.
okay, okay,
You really have to, like why do I need that? Well, I need to know what value X, Y, or Z is, and that might, because delivering its effect might be a factor in given it being in this area.
yeah,
So you're just going to have to learn what delivers. And this is, again, the model of a search is so crucial. Just keep that forever in your mind. That we're trying to say, let's speculate. I wonder if that would actually help. The goal is to get the canvas covered, so you don't have to worry much about it. But the one thing I try to do is make sure I maintain the rightness, shall we say, of the strong guys at the expense of all else. Keep that coming up and getting adjusted with all the new information. Keep on going and improving that, so that you're always, so that the lead characters are also leading in quality.
yeah,
But the need for that, it could be related to simple placement. I may need to know some stuff. When I did this, I didn't get enough clarity about it, and I wanted to know something else. I don't know, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Or maybe it was something useful that had to do with plumb or location of this even. There's so many different reasons that you do any of those things.
And so would it be safe for me to say that quite often I may put something down and think it's effective, but then come back a minute later and be like, that really wasn't effective.
Well, it's effective. See, but that's two different things, though. One is to be effective. That is to say, to be effective in and of itself, to be a good statement of that thing.
Uh-huh.
The other one is it useful? Well, I'm not a big
see.
fan of taking things out. If I put it down, I said, well, what the heck did I even do that for? Well, that's a lesson for tomorrow. But in the meantime, unless it sets you up to have to deal with things you don't want to deal with, that's not really the question.
Okay.
So if your effectiveness meant, and you should just tell me actually, what did you mean by being effective? It might be a good question.
I guess what I meant is, maybe in the function level, because sometimes, or I
So you
don't,
mean more like useful?
useful.
Yeah. Well, so when did this come in? So I would suggest, again, with this conversation, you guys all go back and look at the video where I simply show the stages and talk about the stages of this thing. I think it'll bring you the kind of, at least an awareness of the way this brain here worked that particular day. You know what I mean? Because I don't go around doing stuff that I'm going to have to go and use an eraser on. I go around and do stuff that I'm going to build with. And I'm going to have to improve it, but I go around trying, like this is such a big deal to try to nail this right at the beginning.
Yeah.
To deliver on its edge plus color plus value contrast and make it be sort of be, in a sense, be the girl's head, be the full effect of that naive phenomenon there, that naively seen phenomenon. But to deliver that, including some sense of a placement on the page, right? Which probably included this vagueness over here. Looks like something like this thing was placed very near center by some chance, and maybe I was using that already. So a thing like that would come in. You might bring that in just automatically, even though it's weak as the Dickens. But when it comes to things like this, I'm saying where's the top and bottom? That's a big deal. This stuff here, I think I decided to place the bottom of this foot in some relation to a certain part of this foot because based on the idea of the balance of her feet and stuff like that. I just made some decision about it. But I was doing it primarily based on the location of this to the edge of the frame. I'm always working on the edge of the frame, the mentality of where does this exit? How far up is this? How far is this from the edge? All these things, where the exit's here. Enough of this in there, so it's not going to be touching on the frame, and all those things.
Wow. I'm just looking at this shape in a flat sense, and seeing that curve, that like the bend of it, and it looks so almost like a ghost, or I don't know, like a distortion. But when I look at the whole, like what you have here indicated, it reads perfectly,
right?
And it's just
that's the naive eye, of course.
Yeah, really getting a sense of that 2D naive eye combination.
In some ways, the way you're looking at an image like this, like a painting like this, determines whether you understand me, because this always looks really good to me. Yeah. So, one guy was saying, look at these marks you made across the breast here. What the heck is that? You're obviously not syncing with me. You don't know that I'm not looking that hard. That isn't even noticeable. And in fact, it's part of my desire to have blobs show a little bit, so this looseness is there for you. I want that. But if you can just let your eyes blur
Yeah.
down a little bit, you can start seeing what I found to be really important. And that was things like this and like this and like this.
Yeah.
And certain places that you can see less so, but they're not inconsequential. But you begin to see what I'm saying. So use your eyes rather the way you'll if you just can blur down enough, even looking at this, just darken your eyes down a little bit. You'll know what the way my eyes were being used right at that moment. This is
Mm.
just a perfect likeness of what's there. But that's why I say it's not about these. I actually enjoyed learning. I learned that from looking at his Jerome start. That he had fleck, fleck, fleck all through this lay-in on a nude. You can all find that one online, by the way. And I thought that's interesting. I rather liked the workman-like look of it, but
Mm.
it had a certain looseness that was really, welcoming. It made work in progress. Man at work. Roughing in is a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
But the character of the thing, getting sizes of widths to lengths gesturally, she had a fascinating, powerful pose there, very fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And she has a substantial figure that's very, she has a figure that's very bold and impressive that isn't fat. I mean, it's for me. But there's something about the stance and the great forms. And by the way, this whole model is, even you're talking about form, what is the significant form? What is
Mm.
that? Is there such a thing? Are you getting it? So up on the head, we're talking about an egg. It's essentially that. If you look away, if you blur your eyes a little bit, you can
Yeah.
see this isn't particularly faulty or anything like that. If you look into it, you want me to egg it up some more or something like that. But you see that the broad expression of the bulbous mass of the
Yeah.
stomach into the leg, blur your eye a little bit. I mean, that's the way she looked when you looked at her that way. And it
That's
was all the information I wanted. I want top end, big form, big color relations, but live.
yeah.
Uh-oh.
I have to actually hit the road.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Sean, thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. That's very helpful. I wish I could stay till the end.
I want Gam to know that he's just calling me on this video. Thank you for your contribution.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry it took so long. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, we're doing pretty good, actually. All right. I'll close it out. Take care, Sean.
See you, Paul.
And thank you for doing the easy to understand, hard to do stuff, for transcribing that for people.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right. So, folks, let me see. Let me just look at one or two more. I want to look at this one with you. And again, you see this, the idea, again, if you blur your eyes down, you'll see what I'm doing here, but you darken your eyes even, you'll see a little bit more. You won't see the littleness of marks and stuff. But you can see that the articulation, you're looking at the nose, and there's something about this, the hardest edge. It's got a great locator thing going on here. It's got a very adequate point over here to make it able to find its left and right location. And it probably had a very distinguished location between this and this even. Although if you're talking about something like halves, it might not have been that. That might have been something more up here. But what I'm hoping you can see is that there are things you need to get. The corner here would be a thing you need to get. You need to have some ownership of it. What is it in this area you need to get? What is it down here you need to get? This exit's a big deal, but this one isn't. But this thing here, the way this light ends right there, that was a big deal. That was something I said, I got to deliver on that, right? What's that? So you'll see that it's all about usefulness, all these things. But every area has something that I'm going to call a key. And, in some cases, like this here, you really have to produce the light effect. It's going to be a big key to the entire light effect. You need to get this, and it's going to be that plus this producing it, not just this by itself. And you need to get this one. These things are in a conversation with themselves. Those are things, these are all their different types of keys. The edge is a key edge. It's a key in the sense of how sharp, is that the sharpest edge we have? And is that, I'm going to set up some sharpnesses and to have a discussion with myself while I'm looking at nature about the relationship between the sharpness of this edge and the sharpness of this edge over here. So in any area, if you look at the eye, this is a key area, part of it. This is a key part of it. And the other eye, you can see that it's almost entirely at this little blob over here. And so you see what I'm doing. Hopefully you can begin to see what I'm doing. These are spots that we're saying if we don't get that, we don't get. You see what I'm saying? And every area of the painting has it. A thing like this coming down here has some importance. If it reads that well, it's not going to be as important as this with a major mass shift there because it's stuck in the middle of a different mass. But that's a longer other discussion. If we can, yeah, let's see, there's one more here. Let's just see if we can close it out with this one. So this is a much more complicated picture. Also, both those last two were demonstrations. But what I'm showing you here is how much precision I'm making this with. You see, there's something key about this, right? This is a very, very big deal. Lots of things are going to line up with it or not. There's something very key about the location of this, but also about the greater sharpness of this here and the light effect, whatever. Or maybe about this corner right here. There's something setting up this whole area. There's something about the base of this. These things I'm saying, you'll find there are things, parts to these areas that are the key to the system, if you want to call it that. There are keys. So even the blobs on her gown here, they're parts of it. There's a generalization of this, but that spot right there and the way it relates to this spot right here, this is the discussion about what these lights are going to design like, right? If I don't get enough of them in there, like this one here, and then this double one with a split down the middle, if I don't get enough of that in there, the conversation doesn't get going. It's not an adequate conversation about what's really happening out there. You can see this stuff here was just quite a busy area on here, but I was looking for keys over here. There's a turn of the form here that was rather key. This is a big deal though, to get this right. And I say get that right. If her hair changes, you might find a better line there. But you can see how so many areas really have to be they just have to be really well done in the number of ways, which is why I was saying you are thinking about these things as being the finish, being in the start, right? So if you don't make these things like enough, like I didn't go in here and try to make lips over here. So I want you to make that clear in your own mind. Or here, make eyes. But I delivered on this. This just a visual impression. Dark meets light, color meets color. Edge happens in a measurable location. You can see the same thing with other spots down here, but this would have been the key even before this came into the room. And the same thing over here probably would have been this. I go over here and set a spot down there at the right value and adjust the colors till they are the right color value. And then I pull off that leading edge and use it for measuring and checking the whole world out there. So, yeah. Yeah, think about the idea of what are the keys when you're being visual. And it starts really very much with the mentality of blurring your eye, darkening down your eye. If you're working on an effect-based, a visual order-based model, every area has a dominant element in it that you want to be able, a fundamental skill is to be able to articulate whatever happens in any place on a painting. It's not about the whole painting. It's about, can you just give me this one thing? And then do it one more other place. Find that key thing and really deliver on it. What I'm going to tell you is if you can do that with the strongest players in the room, and I'm talking about just the places where dark meets light, or it could be a glowy light effect. I can go back and look at that with you, a highlight area. But your job is to be able to articulate whichever one it is, to have confidence that you can do that every time. And then to put yourself into the game of getting them well placed and adjusting those effects and then having them well placed in relation to each other, as well as having them adjusted in their effects to each other, right? You begin to realize what an effect-based model actually is like. And those images I just showed you that really does clarify this is an effect-based model. It's a search for powerful lights. I was mentioning this glow. It matters that this is well established here because it's a key to the entire power of the light and the way the light is delivered in this case. It's not all done like a lot of times my students will think that it's all done at the edge just because of things I say. Just because this is an edge-based, so many effects are based on the edge, and your drawing really happens on these edges, the drawing in one sense, right? It's still not only that, right? So effects, your job is to find out whether in the search model, whether you're not, what it's going to take to produce this and keep this rich color here alive, So if you paint the head too light and you can't produce that glow at the form, you might try richer, darker colors. So, yeah, I'm not sure there's more. And this is already, I think, taken an hour, Mr. Producer. So I think I better get out of here. The one thing to remember is as you get to no matter what you put down, debrief to the whole, debrief to the frame. When you put something down, is it in the right place from the right side of the frame? Don't think this is a thing where you just go chugging along doing 18 things, in some order. You got to put the time in. You got to go back, look at it, review it, make sure it's good. Even if it's the first mark, make sure you've checked it. If it's a red, make sure you've checked it for red, yellow, and blue. Make sure you've found the right red the best you can. And then when you bring a new thing in, make sure you adjust it to the in its own red, yellow, and blueness, and then to the other color that's already sitting there, and keep doing that. And then when you get to these effects that are going to be setting up this whole field, these key effects, these key locations, do the same thing there. Articulate them as get the concept of how wonderful they are, and then make them as well as you can possibly articulate them. And then adjust, adjust, adjust to the frame, to the rest of them in the field in all the ways, spatially and coloristically and effectively, effect based. How else would you say that? Um, and then what's going to happen is you're going to see that you're sitting there. What's going to be happening in front of you is the painting is going to be rising toward you, even while you still have white canvas down there. You're going to see the unity of the thing. And once you see the whole, you're now into a place that's so important for impressionists to get to. When you start seeing the whole on your canvas, now the canvas takes over. It becomes a whole new world, and you start understanding our game. All right. And I'm going to leave it at that because this has been very long. Thank you, everyone. Again, Mr. Producer is going to put up on the screen the information about the intensive workshop we're trying to do, a 4-week workshop over in London in this, late spring, May into June. And yeah, and yeah, I better leave it at that. I think that's all I needed to do this time. Mr. Producer, put it up on the line if I forgot to say it. Thank you all for your contributions to our little cause here. Thank you particularly today, John J. and Nancy D. for your nice help. And I think I just better wish you all a very good week. Oh, thank you all for sharing, for subscribing. Keep it coming, would you? We need all that. I sometimes look at other people's information online and saying how much often they tell you, oh, please subscribe, and right here, push this button to subscribe. But yeah, it is true that it does help. It does get a little bit more funding coming in from YouTube, and we're also on Rumble, by the way. If some of you haven't found us there yet, I don't know what Mr. Producer is saying about how we're hooked up for funding and stuff through Rumble, but I'm told we're there, so hopefully that doesn't get us thrown off of YouTube. All right, these are those days, huh? All right, wish you all a very good week. Thank you.